Today's video, we'll be going over how to create this weave texture with infinite detail. As you can see right here, we can zoom in and you literally can keep going. And the only limitation that is how powerful your computer is. So that is the great thing about texturing and procedural node setup in Blender. So this weave fabric texture will be great for a t-shirt, a jacket, a couch, a pillow, anything, and also great for close-up shots. As you can see, I'm zooming in closely, and then once you add some hair onto it, it just pulls it all together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the video and let's create this texture. To start off, let's go ahead and create two identical planes. So the reason why I made two planes, we're gonna be doing a case study of the texture that I already built. So the first step in creating this procedural texture, one thing that we're going to do is create these thread-like structures. And in order to do that, all we need is a magic texture. And we're gonna go ahead and hit Control T, which will give you the mapping and everything that you want. Now, in order for this to scale properly, we're going to wanna use the UV coordinates. So let's go ahead and connect that. So for some reason, when creating this texture, it was just not tiling correctly. So one thing that I did was just add another mapping, and you'll soon see why that's important. So with our magic texture, we're gonna go ahead and create a color ramp. Go ahead and connect this, perfect. And then after the color ramp, we're gonna put a map node, map range. All right, so this will be the general setup for our first thread. Now, one thing that we're going to do is go ahead and crunch this down so we can see what we're working with. So if I preview this, you should get something that looks like this. All right, we're gonna go ahead and scale this all the way down to something like 7, 8, 7, and then let's put 10. Now we're also gonna add some distortion, 9. Now you don't really see anything happening, but once we start adding everything together, you'll see how this transforms into these oval shapes that we'll use for our thread. So for the minimum, and bring it to 0.8. Now you can really see how this is transforming into the weave structure. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and put 0.840. And then for our max, we're just gonna put 1.18. All right, perfect. What's really going to happen to transform it into these oval shapes, because now you see they're just a little too thin, is really within the mapping. So what's really going to transform it is the Z. So as you can see, once we touch the Z, you can see how we're starting to get, but as you can see, it's a little finicky. So for the Z, all we're going to do is just put 0.01 right there. You're not gonna see anything, but that's okay. 0.2, and then Y, 0.1. Now, don't be afraid if you just see all black. Once we start messing with this one, you're gonna see everything come together. So for the location on this, we're gonna focus on the Z because that's gonna be the most important. So we're gonna put 0.29, and now you can see that our threads are back. Now, one thing we wanna do so that this scales how we want it, we're gonna just add a value, and then we're gonna put this at -2.6. And then for our rotation, we're going to do -27, perfect. So now you can see it's starting to get there, but we just need to do a little bit more work. We have to change the Z to 0.1. There we go. So now you can see how we're getting something very similar. Now we can go ahead and dial this in until we get something we like. There you go. So now you can see how it's very identical. And if we want to make them just a little bit thicker, just touching ever so slightly. All right, so once you have the first structure done, to keep it organized, we're gonna hit Control J, and we're just gonna frame it, and we're gonna go ahead and name it. So you see you have name, and then you have label. We're just gonna put T1 for thread 1. Now the cool part about this, once we have that fresh thread done, all we need to do is just duplicate this whole entire setup. But we're gonna remove the values so we can just plug in everything so that they scale all together. And Alt P to disconnect this out of here. There we go. We're gonna delete this, and we're just gonna plug in the value right here. All right, so now we don't see anything, So what we need to do is go ahead and mix these two together. And then for our mix, we're gonna go ahead and add. And then make sure this is all the way up. So you see, once we put add all the way, you can see how they get brighter. That means it's working, you done something right. If not, just go ahead and rewind the video and copy these exact measurements to get this result. Now, what we need to do is move this. So we're not gonna touch this because this is just make sure that it's properly scaled throughout our whole UV and it's not disoriented. So what we need to touch is just this. We're not going to touch the Z. We're only going to touch the X and the Y because we want to just move it down one step. So as you can see, once we move it, we have that other thread. Now this is so finicky and it really took some time to get the right measurement. So for this location, what we're going to type in is 1.02 and then 0.6. And then for our Z, we're gonna leave it. And for our second mapping, we're gonna leave it. All right, so we're gonna make sure that this is 2. And now you can see now everything is lining up. Now you have to be careful with the scale because you can see if you touch the scale here, everything will start to mess up. Just put 0. All right. And if you wanna add some variation, you can play around with the color ramp. If you want to make it a little thicker or have a little gap in between, that's how you would do it with the color ramp. But also once we add up all the threads together, I'll show you how to add some variation so it's not just uniform all around texture. So once we duplicate this setup, we're going to go ahead and change the name and then we're going to plug in these values. Like I said, if you move these, they move really quick. So you just want to make small increments. So 1.17 is good. 0.637 works. And as you can see, it's just a move up from the previous thread. All right, so once we got that thread complete, let's go ahead and do 4. We're gonna go ahead and duplicate this. So now what we need to do is same process. Gonna go ahead and drag this down and we're gonna go to add. There you go, add, and you can see it's getting brighter. That's how you know it's working. All right, so let's make a bigger increment change to this. So we're gonna do 0.86, and then we're going to do 1.42. All right, so comparing it to our first one, you can see we're getting very close to the desired result that we want. So let's go ahead and look at what we created. So we started off with the first thread right here. Then we added the second one, then the third one, and then the fourth one, which is just on top of it, just to add some chaos to it so it's not completely uniform. So now that we have all our threads complete, now what we're going to move on is the horizontal lines that will mesh all the threads together. Now for that, we're gonna use a wave texture. Go ahead, Control T, and then we're gonna go ahead and add a color ramp. All right, so this is what the wave texture looks like. All right, so we're gonna match this up pretty good. So one thing, we're just gonna crunch it down just a little bit. So for our scale, we're gonna go ahead and scale it up to 74. For our distortion, we're gonna go ahead and 10.130. Our detail, we're gonna go ahead and crank this up to 11.60. Our roughness, we're just gonna add 0.6. And in our phase, we're just gonna do -4.40. All right, perfect. Now, so once we got this all dialed in, now what we need to do is go ahead and rotate till it matches. All right, so we're gonna do 80.9. Make sure this is negative. All right, so this is the measurements for this. For our Z, we do -80.9. For our wave texture, we're gonna do scale 74.70, distortion, everything. If you need to pause the video so you get exactly this, go ahead and pause the video. All right, and also for our detail scale, we're gonna scale this down to about 0.430. All right, so now you can see that it's very similar. Only thing left to do is change this to a darker color. So as you can see, it's very identical to what we need. Now this horizontal pattern is important for two things. It's actually going to drive this displacement for the little small threads in between here. All right, so let's go ahead and go about creating this. Let's frame this up, Control J, and we'll just put wave. we're gonna just go ahead and duplicate this, and we're gonna call this thread fine, which is for thread fine detail. Because we have this wave already set as the foundation, once we drive these thread, it will make it more cohesive, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. So what we're going to need for this is a noise texture right here, color ramp, and to see what we're doing, we're gonna go ahead and squish this down to about there is good. Now for our scale, we're gonna go ahead and negative 118.30. So the only thing that we're going to be touching is our scale and also our distortion, which is 2.40. All right, so as you can see, it's not quite there. So the trick to doing this is Control T, and you want to make sure that, actually for our wave, let's go ahead and look at this real quick. We want to make sure that this is on UV. All right, perfect. Our wave. All right, but for our noise texture, we're going to want it on generate. And generate just means that you don't necessarily need a UV texture to texture your objects. It's just however the geometry is deformed, it'll follow around that. So that's exactly what we want. Now this is the trick to getting those fine little hairs right here. So we're gonna just make some space, slide this over here, and we're gonna take this, we're gonna take this color output, and we're gonna put it into the rotation. Now, once we put it in a rotation, that's when you can see we get these fine little hairs, but we're not done yet. We're gonna go ahead and squish these values down to 1.6, 1.06. There we go, negative 6.3. And then we're also going to change this down to 4.20. All right, perfect. So now you can see we have a little bit more detail. Now, if you want some more control, there we go. You can make it finer, less finer, however. And the cool thing about this, you get so much variation. So you see how this section isn't the same as this section, and that section is not the same as this section. All right, so once we have our fine detail, let's go ahead and add this. There we go. All right, perfect. And we're gonna move this over. So once we have our fine detail, what we need to do is mix them together. And we're gonna go ahead and use working. And you see at 50%, and the more we go up with this, the more we get. All right, so now what we want to do is just adjust this right here. I'm gonna pull this back just a little bit, and then we're just gonna adjust it to something that we like. So if we look at it overall, everything looks good. All right, so with our little fine details complete, what we're going to do is now add on top of this with a multiply. There you go. And then we're just gonna brighten these up. So we're gonna add a color ramp, just brighten it up just a tad. All right, so now you can see how we're getting a lot of variation from that wave texture. You see how everything is not uniform. So if we just go back, see how everything just looks very, very uniform. It looks very flat. But once we add that wave texture back on it, that is where we get our depth from. And now the trick to getting it more precise is actually just adjusting it. All right, so we're going to adjust it that it aligns with these small little gaps in between it. All right, so with that, all right, perfect. I like that right there. And one thing that you can also do is play around with these right here. So you have detail scale, there you go. So basically what we don't want it to actually cut this off too much, but just to be in those little cracks. And we can go ahead and let's bring back some darkness. There you go, right there. So that's the cool thing about it. And once the texture is fully done, I'll show you how you can get some more randomness with the wave texture. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is now add these little fine little white hairs. Now that's very simple to do. It just looks a little complicated. All we're going to do is go ahead and copy this, Alt P to take them out. Now what we're going to do for our mapping is go ahead and click this. So you can see it's very similar. All we need to do is just change a couple of the settings to get that. So we're gonna do -16, and we're gonna change the distortion, crank it all the way up to 9.4. And then for our color ramp, that's where, there you go. All right, so now you can see we're getting those fine little hairs that we're gonna add on top to get the variation that we want. Slide it right there. All right, perfect. Now we're gonna add it back on top, but let's go ahead and frame this real quick to add a map range just to boost the white value. 0.2, crunch that. Just add some back, and then what we're going to do is just crank up this to about 4.8. All right, perfect. Just add some back right there. So the more we want, we could crank it up, but this should be good for now. All right, so once we have that, what we're going to do is mix them, and we're going to do lighten, not screen, lighten. And about 50% is good. So you can see how it adds just a little bit more detail. And then we could just play around with the lighten if you wanted a lot or less. And also, let's say you want to break up the strands just a little bit more. You could go ahead and scale this down and get something different. So that's, like I said, that's the awesome thing about Blender procedural nodes. You get infinite possibilities. Add a little bit more detail. But right now, we're just gonna keep it like this. All right, perfect. So now your texture should be looking like this. If your texture does not look like this, it's very important that you follow along with roughly around the same amount of values that I'm putting into each thing, unless something might not work. So let's frame this up, Control J, and we're just gonna name this WF fine for white fine details. So let's just backtrack and see what we did so far. So we got threads, we added them up, we added our details, just brighten it up a little bit. We multiplied our wave texture, and then we added our fine details here. So with all those added up, now we can start working on just adding a little bit more detail so that everything meshes together. So if we look on this side, you can see how once we add some more textures onto it, you can really start to get that weave pattern. Right now, it's okay if you would like to stop here. This texture would look great, but why stop here when you can make it even better? So that is exactly what we're going to do. So first things first, gonna go ahead and add a color ramp, and we're just going to squish these values up till we get something like that, right? And gonna go ahead and add a noise texture right here. Same procedure, add a color ramp, and then see what we're doing. All right, so we're gonna crunch this value all the way up, and then we're gonna crank the scale all the way up, something like this. Our luminosity, we're gonna 4.7, and for our distortion, I'm gonna go ahead and do 1.6, light distortion. So now you can see how we're getting those patterns that look like hair and a woven structure also. And then what we're going to do, just adjust this, and then we're gonna go ahead and merge this together. Now for this one, we're gonna add a screen. Even though mix does look good, for example, if you wanna do something like that to give it more depth, you can. But for this case, we're gonna go to screen. There we go. Now you can see how we're getting that same structure over here. But I actually wanna switch the inputs so that the more I go down, the less the noise texture is revealed. So you can see. So now we can play with it till we get something nice that we like. So when I was doing this, I didn't want the noise and the additional textures to take away from the weave threads. So that's why I'm not doing all the way to 1. So just enough that it separates. There you go. And if we zoom out, let's go ahead and crunch this down just a little bit more. There you go, those black areas, and then, all right, perfect. So we can see the difference. Crunching it all the way down. All right, so once we added that extra detail, now we're gonna add another noise texture just to fill up these small black gaps. So if we look over here, this is what it looks like. And all we're gonna do is a noise texture. Let's go ahead and frame this up. I'm gonna put D1 for detail 1, noise texture. Gonna add a color ramp and see what we're doing here. We're gonna crunch this all the way right here. And we're just gonna go ahead and put this to 189. Our detail, 8.4. Distortion, -3. There we go. And I'm just gonna bring this black value down just a tad. And then we're also gonna make this just a little bit darker. Oh, wrong one. Make sure we're clicking the white. We're just gonna bring it down just like that. Go ahead and frame it so everything is nice and tidy. D2, and then we're gonna go ahead and mix this. And the mix is perfect, right? So if we go right here, and we just mix in how much we want. And it really just blends everything together. So we're gonna keep it around the halfway mark. And this texture is just used to fill up the black empty space. There we go. We can adjust it to match this just a little bit more. All right, so you can see how we're getting that nice detail all together. All right, we're gonna go ahead and hide this. So now that the base material is complete, let's go ahead and start adding some color and doing some other adjustments to make this more realistic. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add a color ramp, and we're gonna change this to a dark green, this to a brighter green right there. It's perfect. Gonna frame this up. We're just gonna put color, and then we're gonna take our principal, just drop it in the middle. All right, so what we want to do is make this just a little bit brighter and make the darkers just a little bit darker. There we go. Make this a little bit more greener. All right, perfect. Now let's go ahead and just work on the material in cycles. So right now it's very flat. So for cycles, what I'm using is experimental, GPU compute. That's good. So now let's go ahead and work on the bump. And that's gonna give it just a little bit more detail. All right, Shift A, bump. I'm gonna go ahead and connect this. And then for the bump, we actually need 2 bumps because we're gonna be mixing them together. But for right now, we'll just focus on 1. So we're not gonna take this color right here because this value is very different from here. So what we're going to do is just color ramp. And what we're taking is from our detail 1, detail 2, merge. That's what we're going to use to drive our first bump. So right now, this is what it looks like. So what we need to do is go ahead and drop our distance all the way down to like 0.05. And now you can see we're getting those separations. All right, and then we're gonna just drop the strength down just a little bit. All right, so to see what the bump is actually doing, let's go ahead and select it. All right, so I do want just a little bit more of that background to pop out, just a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our material. Okay, that's looking a little bit better. Now for our second bump, what we're going to need is the wave texture, which is right here. So we're just gonna go ahead and drag this. Just color ramp just in case we need to adjust it. Go ahead and drop that down right there. All right, and then color ramp into height. Make sure the distance is down like 0.05. See what this looks like. All right, and then just drop the strength down a little bit. And then for this, let's do 0.05 also. It's a little too messy. So let's do 4. All right, I think 1 is perfect. All right, so now what we're going to do is mix these 2 together. And we just want about here. All right, so you can see that wave groove texture coming through, and it's already looking 10 times better. So once you get to this point, now it's really just fine tuning it. What's really going to give it that extra realism is adding a displacement. Now to set displacement up, you have to be in Cycles Experimental GPU Compute. If you're not in those settings, you won't have access to the adaptive subdivision, which is used to push the displacement map. All right, so that is looking good. Let's go ahead and touch up the roughness just a little bit. And then we're gonna go to sheen. I'm gonna turn it all the way up right there. And then for our tint, we're just gonna give it a green tint like this. All right, so on the fat plane, obviously you won't really see the intricacy of anything. So let's just go ahead and hide this plane. So we're gonna go to back to our material. And now you can see it much better. All right, so that is how it looks on there. If we zoom in, like I said, infinite detail. All right, perfect. But we're not done yet. So let's go ahead and just hide this. And what we're going to do is just create a Suzanne head mesh monkey. There we go. Gonna add subdivision. Gonna add 2 subdivisions, shade smooth, and then go add our texture. So now once we have our base mesh down packed, let's go ahead and move on to adding our displacement. So let's make sure we frame this up. All right. So for displacement, we have to make sure that we have subdivision on. Just gonna add another one, and I'm gonna put an adaptive sampling, adaptive subdivision. I'm gonna add a displacement. There we go. And we're gonna plug. We're not gonna plug in this right here. We're not gonna plug in this map because it's just a little bit too noisy, right? Actually going to grab this one right here. So we're gonna color ramp just so we can play around with it, plug it into the height, and then we're gonna plug it into the displacement. So right now you're not seeing the displacement because there's one thing that we need to do before we actually see it. So in our material tab, you wanna go to settings, and it says bump only. Once you turn off bump only, you'll get displacement and bump. So that's when the displacement will begin to work. And just to show you what it's actually doing, so that's if we have it all the way up, but we want a very small value. So we'll try 0.5 first. See, it's way too much, so 0.0025. And let's say we wanna just, there we go. So 0.005 works pretty well. Just want to see how everything looks. Let's go ahead and adjust the color just a little bit. There you go. It's just that color. Let's make this just a little bit darker. Now I do want it to come together just a little bit more. So let's look at our color real quick. And if you zoom in, we get those details that are very crisp. And then now what you can do is mess around with the color, add a little bit more variation in the mixes. There we go. And then once we zoom out, you can see how we have those weave and intricate things. Now for the camera setting, all I have is just a regular camera with depth of field turned on. But you can see that our image is just looking a little too dull. So we're gonna add a little bit saturation to our color. The sheen tint, gonna drop it. I'm gonna add a little bit more saturation to it. So now you can see how we're getting that weave structure all procedurally. You can zoom in, you can make it infinitely bigger, infinitely smaller, whatever you decide. So thank you guys for tuning into the video. I hope you guys learned something. Even if you're not into fabric textures, like I said, you learned a lot of techniques on how to use basic nodes within the material settings to transform your textures to the next level. Stay tuned for the next video where I'll be going over how to add hair with the particle system so that you get that ultra realistic fabric, as we can see right here. So that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned.